We're going to make a new ACH payment. There's two ways to make an ACH payment. One is to click on the Payments and Transfer menu to select New ACH Payment with this link here, or go to the Activity page, which is what I'm on here, and click on the ACH Payment dropdown and select New ACH Payment. Once you're on this page, you'll see the steps to creating the payment. The first step is to choose the payment type you're making. The next is the recipient, then processing details, and then review and submit. So the first option you have, our options are to send a payment, collect a payment, whether you're sending or collecting to an individual or a business. Based on your privileges, you might not see all these options. So you may not have the ability to collect a payment, so you would not see this radio button. Maybe you don't have privileges to send money to individuals, so you might only see the business. So this will depend on your setting. For this scenario, we're going to send a payment to an individual. That takes me to the Add Recipient page. I can add recipients in two ways. I can manually add them by clicking Add Recipients, or I can import recipients. So I'm going to click on Add Recipients and just start adding the required information that is needed. There are two optional fields here. One is for contact ID. So that is a unique identifier for that recipient. You don't have to enter that. I need to enter select the account type, input the account number, input the 9-digit routing number. And then I'm going to add the amount that this recipient needs to be paid. There is another optional field to add an addenda, but that does not have to be input here. So once I add that recipient, I can choose to save them to the recipient table that's underneath this pop-up window, or I can save and add another. If I save and add another, it shows me that that recipient was added, and now I can add my second recipient. I will put an ID in here for this recipient, add all the rest of the information. The amount. And now that I'm done adding the recipients this way, I can select Save. My other option is to import a recipient. So I can add to existing recipients, or I can replace the existing recipients. So if I select this one, it's going to automatically overwrite those two recipients I just added. For file requirements, it's very important that your file is in a tab separated format, and the fields need to be in this order. The name, which is the recipient name, that contact ID, that's optional. So your file does not have to contain anything under the ID, but it does need that column name. Account number, account type, the routing number. Another column is amount, an addenda. Addenda, since it's an optional field, while you still need to have the column name, you don't have to have anything under the column for each recipient. Debits and credits, so you would put a C or a D in your file underneath there for each recipient. And then you need to indicate whether that recipient is on hold or not by a yes or a no. So I can drag my file here, or I can choose a file. Now I can see my file name. If I made a mistake, I can delete that, but I'm going to hit upload. And now you can see, besides my two recipients, I have 4 more recipients. And it does give me that recap. So I can see, one, that I made a payment to individual, which is a PPD. I have 6 recipients now in my payment, and my total amount totals to $104.04. There are search capabilities and filter capabilities on this. So if you've imported a file with hundreds of recipients, this will be very handy. I'm going to look for a recipient. And you can see once I start typing, it filters the list. So I was looking for Polly because when I imported Polly, he's on hold. I want to remove that hold. So now I have that. To remove the filter here, I'm just going to click X. Now I'm back. You can see my amount changed. from 101 to 109 now because I took Polly off of hold. There are other filters here too. So you can filter by account type, which is checking, savings, or loans, the account number of the recipient. You can filter on the recipient's routing number. You can just show items on hold or only show items not on hold or all. You can filter by amount or amount range, and then you can even filter by specific addenda here. I did not add any addenda, but you saw I could have added addenda on the recipient, but I also can enter an addenda information here as well. So now I am through with my recipient, and I'm going to go to the next step, which is processing details. I'm going to select my funding account. So this is the money, this is my account. This list will only show you the accounts that you have privileges for this particular payment type. I'm going to pick basic biz checking. That money that is paying these recipients, that total of $109.34 will be withdrawn from business checking to pay the recipients. Once I selected the account, it depends on your setting for this company ID, but the default for most of you will be, it's going to automatically default to the tax ID and the ID number, and then your company name. You can elect to change this to a DUNS number or a user-defined ID, and then change the information in under ID number and company name. You may have a setting where once you select the account, all you get here is a drop down that indicates the ID number and the company name. So there are two ways that you might have to select this ACH company ID information that is carried in the ACH file for processing. Memo is an optional 20-character field. So you don't have to put it, but it would be a description that you want to attach with the payment. Payment frequency, there's three options. One is a single, which is a one-time payment. Occasional payment, which means it's going to create that one-time payment, but it's also going to create another copy of the payment. And that payment is going to appear on your ACH activity list as unscheduled. So it won't have a payment date set to it, but the payment will be there if you want to reuse it. And then all you would have to do would be to find the payment, go in and edit that payment, and then it will go for processing. The third option is recurring. Recurring means that you want to set up a series of payments. You do have an option whether you want to have that series have an auto approve feature. What that means is the very first payment always has to be approved because you do really want to review the payment before it's approved to start this series. From that point on, though, the first approval for each payment that you make using a recurring feature would have to have would automatically be approved. If you require more than one approvers, the first approval that is required will be automatic. But if you require two approvals, that second approver still has to go in and manually approve the payment. The next thing to think about for payment frequency is when do you want the series to repeat? Do you want this payment to go daily, weekly, every other week, semi-monthly, monthly? Do you want it to go on the first business day of the month, the last, every other month, quarterly, semi-yearly, or yearly? I'm going to select weekly. And you need a payment date. So I'm going to start this next Monday. An important thing to note on this payment date is, since I'm creating a series, sometimes one of the payments in your series falls on a business day or non-business day, which would be a weekend or holiday. So if my payment or one of my payments in the series falls on a Saturday and it's a credit payment, that payment is going to then go out on Friday. If this was a debit payment, that is going to debit the recipient's account on the following business day. So if that debit payment in the series fell on a Saturday, it's going to debit the recipient's account on a Monday if this was a collection versus the payment. I do have an optional at set end date. So this means that while my first payment date is March 6th, I'm going to set my end date. I'm going to make it as April 6th, so a month from now. But I really want to make sure I'm doing this right. So this is going to show me all the payments, not all the payments. For this particular one, it's going to show me all the payments because I only have 5 payments in this series. Always read your tooltips because this says that the list shows you up to the next 6 payments. So even if there were 12 payments in the series, it's just going to show me my next 6. And there would be an indicator by each payment if it did fall on a non-processing day. And that way you'll know if it's a payment, it's going to fall on the previous business day for that credit, or if it's a debit, it's going to go on the following business day. That is the processing details. I'm ready now to go to my next step, which is review and submit. Here, payment name is a required field. This does go in the NACHA file that is sent for processing. I can put in an optional payment description, which does not travel with the file. You may or may not have an option to mark a payment as confidential. This is a privilege. If you have this privilege, once you select it, you can select who can see this payment. So I'm Buffalo Mountain Sports, so I'm the business owner. Maybe I just want to select myself as the only one to be able to view this, or I might pick one of these other users who could see this. And what that means is if it's marked as confidential, only I as Buffalo Mountain Sports would be able to view this payment on my ACH activity list. If I picked Leslie, just Leslie and I would see this payment on our payment list. I'm not going to mark it as confidential. Another option here is you can create a pre-note batch to verify the accounts of the recipients. So if you have a lot of new recipients within your batch, you might want to elect to do a pre-note. What that does is once you submit the payment, this does create a $0 companion batch. So it will create this payment as a batch on your ACH activity list. It will also create another batch that is immediately sent with that $0. And that will let you know within 3 days, according to the NACHA rules, whether those accounts are really viable accounts. This is totally optional. If you didn't want your pre-note, so just a note, if you want to send a pre-note but not submit the payment at this time or have that payment appear in your activity list, you can do finish later. And you can do finish later at any point because maybe I've created this payment so far and I know I'm going to add more recipients. I can elect to finish later. I'm going to look for this payment. I just started doing EX. As soon as I do start typing, it filters the list. Here's the payment I just did. When I selected finish later, it went into an incomplete status. Maybe I go back in to edit. And maybe I've just decided I really just want to change that amount. I can hit next. I actually can just click way over here on the left to review and submit because I know I don't need to change anything on processing details at this point. I just want to finish the payment and move along and get it approved and then send it out. It will go for processing. Once you hit the submit button, you're going to get this confirmation that tells you you require one more approval. You may or may not see an approve button. You're only going to see this approve button if you have approval privileges. Otherwise, you're going to get a notify approvers and the option to export the recipients within this payment. If I hit notify approver, that brings up a pop-up window where you can elect by just checking a box next to users who have approval privileges in your company, and you can select one or more notifications to be sent to this approver. But I'm just going to go ahead and approve this payment. Put in my MFA for my password. You may have a token. And now when I go back to the list, I can view my expenses. It's in approved status. It shows processing begins on March 2nd, and it was approved by myself. So that is payments.